All right, welcome to another Hoopcast. Pat Dooley and Kevin Brockway, the Gainesville Sun. We'll talk a little bit about Florida's disappointing performance up in Athens, where a team that scored 5 times in the 40s scored 54 in the first half against Florida. Kevin, it's still hard to imagine how that could have happened.
Well, they hit their first 8 shots, and there were some ridiculous shots, but I don't think Florida really came out with a good sense of urgency on either end of the floor in the beginning of the game, and I think that this was the first time where I really saw them overlook an opponent, and that's something that this team, with its lack of talent right now and lack of experience, cannot do, and certainly Florida put itself in a position where they had to play uphill the entire game and just didn't really have enough gas at the end.
Yeah, and it was, one reason Georgia did hit its first 8 shots is because nobody was covering them. That helps when Terrence Woodbury's standing out there at the three-point line, just rises up. And Florida doesn't have a guy who matches up with him. They don't have a Corey Brewer-type guy who's got length. And, that's one of the real weaknesses of this Florida team defensively. It's not just foot speed. They don't have a lot of long guys.
Yeah, and, Ray Shipman would be the one guy that you would think that maybe could have, guarded Woodbury and kind of quelled that momentum, but he comes into the game, he picks up 2 quick fouls,
right,
launches a couple of bad shots, and Billy's down on him and sends him back to the bench. So it, really, it's hard for, and 2, it's hard to press, when the other team is making shots, and I think that, and you're not making shots as well, and they didn't really have that many opportunities to press early in the game, which I thought they could have done, and in the second half they started to get the press going a little bit and got back into the game, but for as well as Georgia shot and for as poorly as Florida played defensively early in that game, you still have a chance at the end of the game to win the game, and you only scored 2 points in the final 5:57. This team has a serious problem executing in the clutch, and I just wonder if this group kind of lacks that clutch gene or that ability to perform and execute in pressure situations.
They could use some heart. There's no question about it, and I think that the play that was most frustrating for the Gator fans, and we talked about earlier, is when Zach Swansea drives the baseline for a layup with the game tied late. I mean, Zach Swansea, come on. You can't let that happen. But there's nobody in there to knock it away. I mean, they just don't have any, and I was talking to somebody about this the other day. They really haven't underachieved. With the exception of that game, they're just not that good.
Yeah, I think the talent on the roster is a little thin. I mean, but they do have some guys, a guy like Irving Walker that comes off the bench that can do some things.
Some things. They can't do all things.
But he's a freshman, too, and he obviously made a huge mistake at the end of the game, kind of, keeping the ball in his hands and kind of veering off and trying to create something, rather than, I've had a bunch of people call me up on the replays that said Nick Calathis was open on that play. Walter Hodge was open on that play at the end of the game. And, in that situation, you've just got to defer to the veterans and hope that they, can come through with a game-winning shot.
Well, obviously, it's a disappointing loss. That's a game that Florida couldn't lose. Now they're faced with another one that they're all must win, I would think, at home right now, Kevin, when they play Alabama on Wednesday night. Alabama's a team that's got some athletes and actually is not a great matchup for Florida, even though they're under 500 this year. Yeah,
well, JaMychal Green is a physical presence. Justin Knox. They have Demetrius Jemison coming off the bench. I mean, they're coming in with an interim coach also, so they're going to come in with maybe something to prove. And they haven't won on the road this year, so you think maybe they're due for a good performance on the road. But, I think Florida has to come in tonight and, Wednesday night and show some level of desperation, some level of fire, some level of intensity that, hey, we're not going to let this happen again, because it's really following pretty much the same script in terms of they've lost 3 or 4 now, late January instead of February, but if you count January 31st, 1-3 in the month of February right now, and it's just a team that's kind of I think showing even late in games and late in seasons that they can't respond necessarily to kind of the pressure. I don't think it's necessarily a lack of heart or trying. I just think it's a case of them, I think it's nerves with these guys. I think they need a good sports psychologist.
Well, and again, you don't have that many guys to go to. That's part of the problem. If you've got 5 dangerous players, then it's harder to defend late in the game. They got 1. So that's part of the problem. And, the bottom line with this team is it's got to find a way. And the one thing, I guess they're getting better from last year. They're losing all these games by 3 points instead of by 12 or 15, which they did down the stretch last year. But they've just got to find a way. It's time to man up. And it's time to say, look, we're not going to let this happen again. I don't know if they're capable. They've got 2 games coming up here against under 500 teams in the league, both at home. Last week was the lost week. This needs to be the found week.
Well, it's going to be interesting. I think one guy that'll be interesting to take a look at is Walter Hodge. I mean, here's a senior. His career is winding down. He is coming off a very good game against Georgia, career high 22 points, 6 of 8 from 3-point range. And maybe he's the guy that,
he
becomes
didn't step
a little
on
bit,
anybody's arm either.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, maybe he's the guy that maybe steps up and is a little bit more aggressive offensively and takes some shots and kind of realizes that, hey, I don't want to go back to the NIT again. I've won 2 national championships. This is that would be kind of a sour way to end a career for a guy that had started his career at a couple of Final Fours. Maybe he's the guy that steps it up, becomes a little more aggressive on the offensive end, and makes some big shots and takes some pressure off Nick Calathis.
National title, NIT. Yeah, that's not exactly the way you want it to go, but we'll see. We'll see if they're able to handle Alabama on Wednesday night, and then we'll come back and talk about that game on our next Hoopcast, as well as previewing the game against Vanderbilt here in Gainesville. Until next time, Pat Dooley, Kevin Brockway, the Gainesville Sun, saying so long from the Sunshine State.